This is episode 2 of the PianoForte podcast. Last week's episode was about meeting students where they are and how I like an open formatted piano method for this reason. Today, we are discussing how to bring a little sing to our lessons. And as catchy as this phrase is, bring a little sing, there's actually quite a lot of serious pedagogy behind this. And today we're going to explore a little bit about how the oral system is developed and how we can help students make the connection between that natural development of the oral system and formal musical training. So I'm going to begin with a quote, and you can try and guess if you know which composer said this. The quote is, "You must sing if you wish to play." So when we think about singing in the piano lesson, it's easy to kind of approach this idea that we sing and play at the same time. So basically we accompany our own singing. And absolutely, this is a useful tool. And for those people and for those students who love to sing, this is a really fun activity. For singers, they make a strong case about why it's important to be a singer and that this helps with piano playing. And if you are a singer, you do a few things rather naturally, like this natural way of breathing in music. And singers have this sort of natural ability to soften the ends of musical phrases. It comes a little bit more naturally to gently lean into sound. And as well as things like pulse often come easier for singers, and singers often find themselves more at ease in an environment that is an ensemble or any type of collaborative playing. And all of these reasons are behind the motivation for this advice that you must sing if you wish to play. Of course, the author of this quote is none other than Chopin himself, and this was the advice he gave to his own students. He would instruct his students to go listen to singing, and in some cases, he would insist that they take singing lessons. I personally find this advice from Chopin really interesting. Interesting because it comes from Chopin, because Chopin himself composed almost exclusively for the piano. He was not known as a composer of vocal music. He composed for the piano, mostly solo piano. He didn't, for an example, write an opera. He didn't write choral music. And these are the kinds of compositions that we would think of when we think of a composer who would do something like advise his students to sing. We would think of a composer that is a composer of song. Interestingly, Chopin wasn't this. He did, however, this is an aside, he did write a small collection of songs when he was young for solo voice and piano set to the poems of one of his friends. They're very sweet, but if you've never heard of them, don't worry. They're not very well known. And beyond this, he did not write vocal music. However, despite the fact that he did not write vocal music, it is easier for us to understand how singing influenced Chopin's music. He was a master of creating a long lyrical line. He loved the bel canto style of singing, which of course is something we can recognize in his music, in the nocturnes, for example. It's easy to understand that he believed that singing made you a better player and why he would suggest such a thing to a student. However, that is not what we're going to talk about today. Today, when I talk about bringing a little singing to lessons, my reasons are a little bit different and have more to do with cognition and the way singing interacts with the brain and how we can use this in our lessons and in our teaching to help our students develop a deep understanding of music that goes beyond just a natural ability to phrase and to feel pulse. So to begin, we're going to start at the beginning and the way we develop hearing. Hearing begins before birth. At about 4.5 months of pregnancy, an unborn baby begins to hear sound within the mother's body, like heartbeat. Then around 6 to 8 months of pregnancy, the baby begins to hear sounds from outside the mother's body, like voices. The sounds they hear help shape the way they will go on to understand sound, the way they will eventually interact with sound. There is even some evidence that suggests that experiencing sound in the womb helps develop the physical body as the little body and the little skeletal frame responds to sound vibrations. So in a way, and if we want to be a little bit poetic, music helps form us physically and mentally. And these early interactions with sound frequencies lay the foundation for things like the acquisition of language. I find this really beautiful that from the very beginning, music has such an influence on who we are and who we become. I often ask my students this question: what was the very first instrument ever? And they'll usually guess something like drums. It's not correct, but it's an intelligent answer. Some will say guitar, and I maybe get where they're coming from if they're thinking about an old-fashioned lute or something, but of course that's not it. Once in a while, someone will say that the very first instrument was a flute, and they do get points for this because it is actually the correct answer. Technically, the earliest known instrument is a flute that was made out of bone that was found in ice from 50,000 years ago. However, none of these suggestions are the answer I'm looking for when I ask the question, what was the very first instrument ever? Because of course the answer to that question is human beings. Human beings are instruments, and the human voice is the first way human beings made musical sound. And interestingly, an unborn baby doesn't just hear sound. They also hear overtones. And an overtone are these mini vibrations that exist within one fundamental vibration. And they experience these fundamental vibrations and the frequencies of the overtones when they were unborn, so before they were born. And they experience this even before they interact with another human being using language. After birth, after a baby is born, they are, of course, surrounded by lots of sound stimulation, but there is something very specific that happens at this stage that directly influences the way the oral system develops. This stage right after birth. And it is the way the infant experiences sound from the mother and any other close human beings around them. This way of interacting with a baby is for that reason called motherese, or its more scientific name is infant direct speech. When an adult speaks to a baby, they do it in this instinctual musical way where the voice rises and falls. There are pauses. The vocal pitches used tend to center around the first notes that are actually found in the harmonic series, which are the fundamental, the dominant, and the medians, or explained another way, they are the notes of the major triad, roughly. So a little baby experiences sound like this in a musical way. They're experiencing language like this in a musical way with direct experience with overtones and the overtone frequencies. In response to this, the baby begins to babble, and they begin to echo with their own voice these tones that they are hearing in their sound environment. There's an interesting study actually about the development of language that I won't really go into at this time because it's quite a lot, but it argues that music is not in fact language, as some say. And honestly, sometimes I actually say this to my piano parents when I want to explain how powerful it is to learn oral skills. I might compare the learning of music to the learning of language. But in reality, music came first and language grew out of the early musical sound we heard both before birth and then throughout these early infancy and early childhood. So It's easy to say that children are naturally musical because they are. They kind of are music themselves. As music teachers, we can connect to this and use it as a pedagogical tool when we are teaching. In fact, it's almost like we aren't teaching at all. We aren't teaching our students as much as we are helping them to remember. And the best way to do this is by singing. Singing creates a musical vibration within the child's body that resonates with the experience they had during their fundamental development. And this is also why we introduce, when we're singing with young children, the syllables so and me first. And what I mean by so and me is that in the practice of movable do solfa, that is when do acts as the tonic note, so and me are the 5th and the 3rd scale degrees. So when we introduce so and me first, like so, me, the child can easily hear it and they can usually sing it back. And these, of course, are the tones they ever heard. These are the overtones. As an aside, before we go on, because this question gets asked sometimes, if you're wondering why not just start with tonic itself, the answer is simply that it is not necessary. The 2 pitches, so and me, they are the strongest pitches in the overtone series. And when we sing those, and when the child sings those, it allows for a natural understanding of where do is without having to actually sing do in the beginning. Now, it is so super easy to introduce music this way to a piano student. It can be done right at the bench. We can sing these pitches together or with them, or we can call in response these pitches. And then it is easy to replicate these pitches on the piano because it's just 2 tones that they can play using 1 note in each hand. So I'm going to give an example, and if you're watching the YouTube video of this podcast, you can see it, but you can also just imagine it if you're just listening. So I'm showing a diagram where it shows how a student can place the number 3 finger of each hand on the notes so and me. So for example, this might be on the note D and B in the key of G. And you can sing the pitches, and then you can transfer that singing straight to the piano into playing. Now, to grow from this, lessons can begin to gradually add more solfa pitches until we have built up to a pentatonic scale, and then further on into a diatonic scale. So first we have so and me, so, me, which are the 3rd and the 5th scale degrees. Then we add the syllable la. And so this goes like this. So, la, so, me. La acts as an auxiliary or a changing note for so. So it's a note where we can go from so, away from so, and back. So, la, so. And these 3 pitches, me, so, and la, are universally found throughout childhood. They're found in childhood games. They're found on the playground. So, for example, so, me, la, so, me is also na, 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 na. All children hear this. Finally, to complete the pentatonic scale, we add the tonic, which is do, which they already sort of can hear in their mind. And we need a passing note between me and do, which is re. So then, and I'm going to demonstrate this on the video. I'm going to demonstrate it using the crow and hand signs as well. We have these pitches. Do, re, mi, so, la, so, mi, re, do. These are the pitches of the pentatonic scale. Of course, on the piano, these are super easy to play because they are the black notes. And in the little song, The Mountains, which I'm going to demonstrate, but I'll also sing it to you, it uses the black keys and these pitches, so, and these pentatonic pitches. So, for example, I'll just sing a little snippet of it here, and then you can look at it again in your copy of the book. So it goes like this: so, so, la, la, mi, re, do. So, so, la, la, mi, so. That's the solfa. The words are, from my doorway looking out, I can see the mountains, and so on. We can sing that with the children in solfa. We can sing it to them with the words. We can sing that song and accompany it with drums. We can sing it and accompany it with xylophones or scarves or movement. And then we can take it to the piano and recreate it using the black keys. And when that's competent, we can recreate it on the white keys, and there's options for that to decide this. We can play a duet with our students, and all of a sudden, we've taken 5 little notes that resonate with what the child already understands naturally, and we've created this very rich, very powerful learning experience that we can then grow from there. And this way of teaching is so powerful because it uses experiences they've already had. Even if it was experiences they had when they were a baby, even if it was before they were born. It takes these musical little experiences and it grows them like a little plant. Every time we sing with our students, it's like we water a little plant and their little musical foliage gets bigger and richer. Okay, so it's easy to talk about this, but in practice, how does it work? Okay, so what about the student who won't sing? We know that it's powerful and valuable, but what about the child that actually walks in our studio and won't sing? And I think personally there are 3 categories of singers. I think children who are singers. There are children who love singing and they'll sing anything. There are children who are shy to sing or are hesitant to sing, or they sing very, very softly. And then there are children who refuse to sing. And this includes children who might experience something like being selectively mute or have some other reason why they don't want to sing, which probably includes communicative hesitancies in other areas of their lives. So I think there are these 3 categories of singers. For the children who love to sing, easy peasy. We sing, they sing, everybody sings, everything's straightforward. Sometimes they might struggle to match pitch, but this is something that can be taught and practiced and learned. For the child who is shy or hesitant to sing, I think these are children who might not have experienced a lot of singing in babyhood. They literally might just not be used to hearing singing and singing themselves. These children can usually be brought along with the idea of singing in time if we just do the singing mostly and gently encourage them as we go along to join in as and when they're ready. For the children who refuse to sing, I just sing to them. I do all the singing. I'm very gentle. I don't want singing to be traumatic. I do all the singing and I ask them instead to sing in their minds along with me. And of course, this echoes Gordon's sound before sight. We want the sound to be a mental singing in our minds anyway. So this is a good goal for all of them, to internalize musical pitch. So I sing as much as possible throughout the lessons, and I believe that this is making a difference for them. Of course, for all the other children, I do the same, but they are usually more willing to join in with singing. The magic of this practice of bringing singing to lessons is it's demonstrated in the first lesson. We can see the benefits of this from the very first lesson. Children immediately connect singing to playing with hardly any explanation. Singing becomes the complete foundation for all music lessons. First we sing and then we play, and that's what they know. We sing and play. It also allows them to understand how to read musical notation, but that is something I will explore later because that's a big, big topic. Naturally, as well, a practice of singing in our piano music becomes even more beneficial as our students study advanced repertoire. I have noticed, and you can let me know if you have seen the same, that it seems that less and less piano students are playing fugues. I think one of the reasons for this is that they don't understand how to understand and how to hear the voices of a fugue. And if you can't sing the voices of a fugue, it's so difficult to learn a fugue, and it's almost impossible to interpret it correctly. And Bach, after all, he did compose music for voice and choral, and his compositions are extremely extraordinary and very complex. And it makes sense that to play his music, we would need to sing. If the piano student does not have a practice of doing this, they will naturally find this music difficult to learn. But even Chopin wanted us to sing, and he did not write vocal music. And honestly, I can't think of any better advice to follow than Chopin's. Thank you so much for joining me today. You can find all the ways to follow the PianoForte YouTube, social media, newsletter, all of that on the website, www.pianofortemethod.com. Thank you for joining me, and see you next time.